Welcome back to Legends Live, as presented by the National Basketball Retired Players Association, the home of all our NBA and WNBA legends. I'd like to remind viewers you can submit questions during the show that we'll get to before we wrap up. Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome in today's guest. We have former Syracuse Orange, former Washington Bullet, Detroit Piston, as well as the mayor of Detroit, Michigan, and one of the founders of the Retired Players Association. We've got Mr. Dave Bing with us. How are you, sir?
I am great, Tyler. My pleasure being with you.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Looking forward.
First things first, how are you? Have you been keeping busy in this bad weather? I think everybody's we were talking about it a little bit before we went live, but how are you staying busy?
I've got a program for Black men and Black boys, a mentoring program.
Okay.
Where it's one-on-one mentoring. And as important as we think education is, we have so many of our inner city youth, urban youth, that maybe only 50% of them who get to the ninth grade graduate from high school. And so we're not an education, we are a buddy to the kids to make sure that they understand how important education is going to be for them to succeed in life.
Now, how did you get started with that?
Once I came out of the mayor's office, I had been to places in my 50 plus years here in the city of Detroit. I'm not a native Detroiter, Washington, D.C. And after my stint in the mayor's office and my engagement with the public school system here, actually knowing I was a mentor. I mean, I was just friendly with a lot of young kids growing up here in the city of Detroit.
Yeah.
And I saw how challenging their environment was, and thought that instead of me sitting down talking about how bad things are, how bad our kids are, et cetera, I wanted to change the narrative.
Right.
And talk about, these kids can be the next NBA All-Star, the next entrepreneur that's successful, the next politician that can be successful. And I just wanted to let them know, about my life and the challenges that I had. And in spite of those challenges, you still had success.
What have the challenges look like, doing this mentoring now during the pandemic? A lot more things are, virtual or online. Have you all been making that transition?
It's a tough transition, and I'll tell you, we've got 88 boys in our program from the 7th grade through the 12th grade. And to a person, every last one of them wish they were back in school.
Wow.
So they're dealing with the pandemic, but I think from a socialization standpoint, from a friend standpoint, from an entertainment standpoint, and hopefully from an education standpoint, they want to be back in that environment. That's what they miss. Yeah.
Definitely. Now, you mentioned earlier, not a native Detroiter. You've been there for a while, but you are a native from D.C. I read something. I just want to know if you can confirm this for me. I read that growing up in D.C., you used to play basketball with Marvin Gaye. Is that true?
Well, Marvin was on the same playground or rec center that we grew up in the same area.
Okay.
And so we knew each other as kids. And Marvin would come down to the rec center, and very seldom did he get chosen to play. So he'd be in the sidelines somewhere if he wasn't playing. He had his thumb or his finger in his ear singing.
Okay.
And it was obvious that he was pretty talented. He had a great voice, and he made the right choice. He got away from basketball and went into singing, and obviously the rest is history.
Okay, I was going to ask, did he? Was there any chance of him being an NBA star and singer? But it sounds like he picked his stronger suit in singing.
He was a smart guy. He went in the right direction for sure.
Now, a lot of great basketball players from DC area, like yourself, Elgin Baylor, Kevin Durant, Adrian Dantley. What do you think DC's got to do to kind of get that respect as a breeding ground, like for great hoopers? I feel like DMV as a whole kind of gets it, but what does DC have to do to stand out?
Well, a lot of our players, because their families moved out of DC, and so now a lot of them in the Maryland area.
Right.
And so we don't have as many great basketball players coming out of the city of DC itself, but still in the area.
Right.
When you look at DC and you look at Maryland, you look at Virginia, you got a 25-mile radius where a lot of guys have come out and done exceedingly well. Elgin and I are from the same high school. Okay. And we're probably the only two in the top 50 that are from the same high school. So
I'd say so.
Yeah. So, Elgin is 10 years older than me. So I got a chance to see him play as a kid growing up. Mm-hmm. And boy, what a talent he was. He was way ahead of his time.
I'll say, who are some of the other guys, I guess, from the in or around that area that you saw either watch, growing up? They could have been older than you, around your same age.
Yeah. Well, John Thompson, we should have been high school teammates because he lived 2 or 3 blocks from the high school that I went to. But he went to a Catholic school, John Carroll. And because, the Catholic schools could recruit, where in the public schools, you had to go to the school that was in your area.
Right.
Dantley, same thing. There's a lot of guys who grew up in D.C., but as they became really great players, a lot of them finished their high school careers outside of DC. Yeah. So even with Kevin Durant, same thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, after high school in DC, you made your way up to Syracuse. How did you decide on Syracuse?
Syracuse was the last school that I visited, and the first Black to ever win the Heisman Trophy happened to be a senior at Syracuse at that time, Ernie Davis. Mm-hmm. So between Ernie Davis and John Mackey, the All-American and the tight end with Baltimore, were the 2 guys that really recruited me, because Syracuse, when I was recruited, had no Black players.
Wow.
And my freshman year, there was one other Black player that came in with me. He came from Boys High in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And Sam Pensil. And we never had more than 4, for my 4 years, we never had more than 4 Black players on our team.
Wow.
Since then, it's been altogether different.
Yeah.
With Jimmy Boeheim, who was my roommate in college, Jimmy has had just a great run at Syracuse, and he's there now. I don't know how much longer he's going to coach. But he has had a tremendous run of success in his years at Syracuse.
Yeah, I was going to mention that you were roommates with Jim Boeheim. What's something we don't know about Jim? Like, he doesn't like to clean up after himself. He doesn't do the laundry, or what's something that we don't know about Jim?
Well, you just hit it on the head. That plus he really didn't like to study. I mean, Jim, very, very bright guy. And he had this ability to cram for an exam. And the night before an exam, I mean, he could stay up almost all night and go into the exam and ace it. Yeah. And then he forget about everything that he had crammed for. But a talented guy from an academic standpoint, and obviously a very great coach.
Now, did you see any of that coming? Like at the time, obviously, you never know down the line a guy be a champion Hall of Fame coach. But did you see that, like at the time, like he had the mind to be a basketball coach?
I did, because he drew up plays in the room while we were, talking and reliving our practices and reliving games that we had played in. And he would tell me a lot of things about options. Our coach would give us the play, but most of the options was Jim was scoring.
That's why he was drawing them up. Yeah.
Oh yeah. He said, you're going to get double team. You're going to get triple team. This is where you look. This is where I'll be.
Yeah, pass it to me.
He's always a smart guy.
Now, being from DC, later on you played with the Bullets. How was that experience for you playing at home? I know some people have said like it's a lot of pressure or stress being in your hometown? A lot of people have enjoyed it. So what was that experience like for you?
Mixed emotions for me because I didn't play in DC until almost the end of my career. I played my first 9 years in Detroit and had tremendous success in Detroit. Um, when I went to DC, they had a team that had just lost the NBA championship to Golden State. And they got swept 4 games. So the trade for Kevin Porter and myself was made. And as I came to DC, I had to really change my style because they had Elvin Hayes, who could score. They had Wes Unseld, and they had Phil Chenier. All three of those guys were all-stars.
Right.
So I had to figure out how to fit in with them. I mean, I was a great scorer in my first 9 years, but I knew I couldn't go down there and try to take over because they had good players on that team. Right. And so I changed my game and became really a point guard instead of a scoring guard because Phil was a scoring guard.
Was anybody that you like modeled your game after at that point, either in your Detroit days or DC days, or you just kind of went out and did your thing?
I kind of went out and did my thing, to be very honest with you. I mean, my style was, I could jump. I was quick. I could run. I could penetrate. I love going inside. I love contact because in DC, that's what we learned on the playgrounds. You couldn't, you had to go in and with the big guys. If you couldn't do that, it wasn't. They didn't have a 3-point shot.
Right.
So you went in and mixed it up with everybody.
I think the 3-point shot, if I'm not mistaken, came in after you had retired, not shortly
correct.
After you retired.
Yeah, exactly.
How did you feel about that? Like, was that something you kind of wish you would have had, or no?
I'm not crazy about it. I think what happens. I mean, I think I'm somewhat of a Pierce as far as the game is concerned, and as a guard, as you're running the fast break, the years that I played, the guys wanted to get a layup. And so they filled the lanes all the way to the basket as opposed to flaring out trying to get a 3-point shot. And I think the 3-point shot has, I'm not crazy about it, to be very honest with you. It definitely has changed the game. And a lot of guys are prolific 3-point shooters. And so, a lot of strategies. I mean, you're never out of a game. I mean, when you're 15, 20 points down and you got the 3-point, you got great shooters.
Right.
I mean, you're never out of the game.
Yeah, you can make that up in a couple minutes. You hit 2, 3 threes, you right back in the mix.
Right back in it. Exactly.
Now, you mentioned the success you had in Detroit, All-Star games. You made 7 of them. What do you remember about your first All-Star game? We've got the NBA's All-Star game coming up here soon.
That first All-Star game for me was in Madison Square Garden in New York, my second year. And the backcourt was myself and Oscar Roberts, a forward. We had one hell of an all-star team.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, the difference back then compared today, you played to win because you weren't making a lot of money, back then. And in an all-star game, I think the winning team got $7,500 and the losing team got $5,000. So you wanted to win. You wanted to play, and you play hard. Today, the guys make so much money. Hell, it's unbelievable. I don't think it is nearly as competitive as it used to be in the era that I played in.
Right.
Now it's a show, and it is exciting. I mean, but they don't play any defense at all. When you see games, you see them getting 150 to 160 points in 48 minutes. Yeah, you're not playing any defense. As great as you may be as an offensive player, that's a lot of points to score.
Now, again, of the 7 you made, do you have a favorite of your All-Star appearances?
Oh yeah, the one that in Philadelphia where I won the MVP. So
that'll do it.
Yeah, that's the one I remember because that was that's my first year playing with the Bullets. And I wasn't sure that my game had changed, but because I had played in, 6 previous All-Star games and had great statistics, there were guys who I think had at least as good a year as I was having at that time, who should have been considered as an all-star.
Hmm.
But it didn't work out that way, and I wanted to prove that the people who voted me in were not necessarily wrong. And luckily, I won the MVP.
Who else was in that All-Star game with you? Who were some of the names in that one?
Well, you had Havlicek, you had Biggie, you had Wes, you had Dr. J. Yeah, so you had still Moses Malone. So you had some outstanding players on that particular team, and that was the East team.
Mm. Now, after your days in Detroit, after you retired, you ended up founding a steel company in Detroit. Like, was the business aspect, like, was that something you were always interested in, or how did that come about?
Always interested in running my own company. My dad, who grew up in South Carolina and never finished high school, was a tradesman. He's a bricklayer by trade, but he could do everything with his hands. I mean, plumbing, cement finishing, cabinetry, all of that. He could do all of that.
Some of everything.
And I saw him as a kid growing up doing all of those things. And even though he was a small independent entrepreneur, he was a guy that was in charge. And so, I looked at him and said, one day I think I'd like to do something like that. And the opportunity, once I retired from basketball, the opportunity to go into business here in the city of Detroit opened up a lot of avenues for me. And Detroit, obviously, as the center of the universe as it related to cars and trucks, is something that I kind of went to. I went in that direction. And after 2 years of training in the steel business, there were no blacks that I could remember in this business. And so I decided, let me do something different. Let me take a shot at this. And after 2 years of training, I started with 4 people. And after 29 years, I was about 1,300 people. And there was a quote unquote a minority company because of my ownership.
Right.
But I'd say 80% of my staff were African American. And I wasn't, I wasn't just gung ho on being a minority company. I wanted to give as many opportunities to do that. And I feel very good about that as I look back and say, I think, and even with some of the people who worked for me, they ultimately left and started their own companies because I think I gave them enough insight and enough support to say that if I can do this, you can do it also. And it worked out very well.
Now, I read something else I hope you can confirm for me. Is it true that while you were an NBA player, that you worked off seasons at a bank? Is that true?
For 7 off seasons, I worked for the National Bank of Detroit. That particular bank, and when I came in as a rookie, I had 2 kids while I was in college, and I didn't want to live in an apartment. So I wanted to live in a home because I lived in a home as a kid growing up in DC. And so I went to this bank to try to get my home financed, and they turned me down. And the reason they turned me down because they said you had no credit. You're just coming out of college. You're just going to the Detroit Pistons, an NBA team. We're not sure that you're going to be there for a long time. So they didn't want to take the risk.
Yeah, it's up. I mean, guy makes 1-2 All-Star games. Who knows how it's going to end up?
Yeah. So what happened? I was Rookie of the Year. And at the end of the season, that same bank came back to me and said, you know what, we think we made a mistake. So we didn't give you the financing that you need for your home, but we'd like to give you a job in the off season. So I worked for that bank for 7 years in the off season, even though I had started to make much more money, after my rookie year. But I used that as a stepping stone to prepare myself for what I dreamed of, and that was to become my own entrepreneur, my own business owner.
Now, I guess what type of work were you doing? Did they have you doing at the bank, like financial stuff, teller work, or?
Well, I started off as a teller. My first season. My second season, I became a head teller.
Okay.
And then I became an assistant manager. Then I got into lending, in terms of mortgages and financing and accounting. So I learned a lot that really helped me when it was time for me to make the decision to run my own business.
Now, did you use that on the court? Like you might be guarding a guy and tell him you can get him a good, good interest rate on a loan, or on your bank card, you put like rookie of the year / head teller Dave Bean on there.
No, never that. Never that. Most of the guys in my era did not work in the off season. Because I think a lot of us probably felt that, you're making this money. You're a star. Everybody wants to be around you. And a lot of guys just went and made money with speaking engagements, playing in tournaments and what have you, and not preparing themselves that the day was going to come when you would no longer be an NBA player.
Right.
And I knew for sure that was going to happen to me. And fortunately, I played 12 years, which is a long career. Mm-hmm. But I'm 34 years old when it came time for me to make a decision to retire. So you've got your whole life in front of you. And if you're not prepared to do something else, you're
Oh, I think we lost you there for a second. I think we got you back. Now, after
yeah, I'm back.
Okay, sorry about that. After your business days, you went into politics. I mentioned you were mayor of Detroit. Was that something that you always had? Something that you always wanted to check off your list?
Absolutely not. Even as mayor, I didn't consider myself a politician. I came into that position because we had a young mayor by the name of Kwame Kilpatrick, who was just a brilliant young man who had all kinds of potential, but he made some bad decisions and got himself, in jail. And so the business community and the community at large was really looking a group that was out looking to try to find out, get some names together who we could present as our next mayor. And I didn't know that they were talking about me. And so I ultimately came in, and the last 8 months of Kilpatrick's second term, I took over that, and then I was reelected for a 4-year term. And that was the toughest job that I think I've ever had, because whatever happens in a city, it goes back to the mayor's office. Yeah. Very seldom do you get credit for any good things that happen, but anything that's bad, that's negative,
it's coming right to you.
Oh yeah, it comes right to your desk. But people ask me, if you had the chance to do that again, would you make the same decision? And my answer is yes, because it wasn't about me. It was about really trying to bring the city back. And this city has been good to me. I've been here 50 plus years, and anything that I can do to be supportive and be helpful is what I wanted to do. And so we went in with a staff, and I think we turned a lot of things around and moved the city from where it was in the right direction.
You said even as mayor, you didn't see yourself as a politician. Is there any politics in your future, or you think that chapter is written? That's in the past.
That chapter's gone and closed up, no doubt about it. I mean, and today, when you look at politics, it has changed so dramatically. I don't know how you enjoy it, to be very honest with you. And I mean, everybody looks at it today as a powerful position. But if you really want to do something to help people out, I mean, don't look at yourself as a politician. You're a servant for the people. And anytime you're there for the wrong reason, whether it's money, whether it's power, you're not going to do well. You're not going to last very long.
Right. So I'll ask you one more question here, then we'll jump to some questions from our viewers here. Mentioned earlier that you were one of the founders of the NBRPA, who's sponsoring this very show we're on now, along with Oscar Robertson, Dave Cowens, Archie Clark, Dave Debusshier. So how did that come about?
Well, Archie and I are both in the city of Detroit, and we have known each other because we came in as rookies together. And Oscar was a guy that I had tremendous respect for, and he's a guy that introduced me into the Hall of Fame.
Hmm.
So we had a great relationship. I played 1 year with Dave Cowens, and I've also played with DeBusschere. So I have relationships with all of those guys. And what we saw was retired players were were in a lot of trouble, financial trouble.
Yeah.
The guys in our era didn't make enough money as a player to take care of themselves and their families, you know, in a second career. Very few of them got into a second career. So they didn't have health insurance. They didn't have a pension in a lot of cases. That really set the stage and made our careers what it was. And we wanted to be able to give back to them and then think about the next generation, those people that came after us.
Right.
So when we, you know, early on, there was a pushback. The office in New York really looked at us and said, you know, we don't need you guys to do this. Right. And we said, no, we fought it for 5, 6, 7 years before they said they're not going away. Right. And so fortunately today, the Retired Players Association is something that's given a lot of our players what they didn't get as an active player. They're now, you know, the pension fund is strong. The health care that's so needed today for a lot of the players whose injuries don't really come up until they finish playing. Right. And so a lot of guys who may not get a job where they got health care and what have you, that's something that we really fought for. So I'm very pleased that the 5 of us came together, all of us, you know, as all-stars, never forgot where we came from and wanted to try to make this league a better league for our ex-players.
Definitely. We've got a couple of viewer questions here we will jump into. Let's see what we've got first from Bridget and Julio backstage. We've got For Your Eyes Too. He says, how would you adjust how we rank players? Should Wilt be number 1? I'm guessing he's talking about in terms of like our all-time rankings.
Yeah. Well, fans today who didn't have a chance to see Wilt Chamberlain play, I would say that Wilt was the most dominant player ever from a scoring and a rebounding standpoint. People can look at him and say, well, he couldn't do this or he couldn't do that, but he was the most dominant player. When you look at players in my era, I think the best all-around player was Oscar Robertson. And when you look at guys today, I mean, between Michael and LeBron, you know, they got all the skills that anybody could ever wish for. And they have had tremendous careers. And, you know, there's some great players in the league today, but there are players that played in my era who could compete with guys today.
Definitely. Let's see, next question. Got one from the real Matt Money. Matt says, what were some of the reasons for choosing to play for the Celtics in 1977? Oh, not sure if we can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Did the question come through okay?
I see it.
Okay.
The reason that I went to play for the Celtics is that I didn't like the way my career ended in DC my second year. And so Red Auerbach is somebody that I knew from childhood because actually Red lived in the DC area.
Really?
And, yes. And so when I retired from the Bullets, Red gave me a call at my mother's house and said, you know, what are you doing retiring? You're not ready to retire yet. You still got some game left in you. He says, I need you to, you never played on a really great team. And if you come to the Celtics, I think we've got a chance to win a championship. We've got JoJo White and Charlie Scott in the backcourt. And we've got Sidney Wicks and Curtis Rowe and John Havlicek at the forward positions. We got Dave Cowens at the center. And if you come, that'll round out our back court. And I think we can compete against anybody. So he said, we got 7 All-Stars. But the reality is that all of us were former All-Stars. I don't think any of us were All-Stars at that point.
Right.
But that was the really changing of the guard in Boston. And I didn't like Boston as a city, quite honestly. And I didn't move my family to Boston. I had 3 daughters who were in high school at the time. And so I needed to get back to Detroit and take care of the family.
Right.
So, but I had a great year in Boston. I really enjoyed my teammates there, and most of us remained friendly. I'm sorry that we've lost a few of them, but we've always remained friendly.
Did you have any consideration about giving like another year, either in Boston or somewhere else, or after that you knew that was your time?
Well, I could have played, I think, and been productive for another 2 years. But Boston's our team, like I say, we had 7 former All-Stars, so I didn't see a lot of opportunity for us to win a championship. And that next season is when they drafted Larry Bird.
Okay.
And Auerbach never let me forget, as you come back, you would have been playing with Bird, with Parrish, with McHale, and what have you. Well, that's all water under the bridge, as they say. I'd made my choice, I made my decision, and I stuck with it.
Yeah. Let's see if we got any other questions here. It says, as a 7-time All-Star, which one was your favorite All-Star? Went to this a little bit earlier, but toot your own horn again. If you tell us about it. Somebody may have joined us a little late.
Yeah, well, like I said, I wasn't sure in my heart that I should have been starting in that All-Star game. I think I played well enough to be on the All-Star team, but maybe not as a starter.
Right.
And so I had something to prove in that people and coaches had selected me as a starter. And I didn't want to let myself down, my teammates down, or those that had selected me. So as fortunes may have it, I wound up having a nice game, won the MVP, and the rest is history. I enjoyed that game the most.
Got another one from For Your Eyes. It says, who are some of your favorite players in the current league now? And is Trae Young on that list? So I guess who are some of the young guys now you enjoy watching?
It's easy to talk about LeBron. I've always liked Chris Paul because I think he has been a consummate point guard for a long, long time. Curry with the ability to shoot the way he shoots. And now the young boy down in Atlanta, Trae Young, is an outstanding talent. Like to see him play. He plays offensively. He's as good as anybody, in my opinion. I mean, he can score, he can pass, he can get into the lane, he can create, and he's going to have a bright future ahead of him. But Kevin Durant. I mean, Kyrie. I mean, there's so many players with this unbelievable talent that you can enjoy watching them, and those are just few of the names that come to me in the top of my head.
Anybody that reminds you of yourself?
I think probably between Westbrook and Derrick Rose. Okay. I mean, those are the 2 guys because we could shoot the jumper. We all could jump. We could run. We could penetrate, and we were point guards, but who could score.
Right.
So when you really look at how many scoring guys can also pass the ball, those are the 2 guys that come to mind to me.
So got one from Trevor Adams. Trevor says, the top 5 guards you ever played against, and who is your favorite teammate?
My favorite teammate is easy was Bob Lanier.
Okay.
Bob probably was the best shooting center ever. I don't think there was any big guy that could shoot as well
Mm-hmm.
as Bob. It had to be Oscar and Jerry West.
Mm-hmm.
They were head and shoulders better than anybody else. But then there was the guys in New York. There was Earl Monroe. There was Walt Frazier. I mean, in the era that I played in, there was never an off night where you're going to play against somebody that you didn't have to worry about.
Right.
I mean, every franchise had a great player, a great backcourt player. I mean, I look at the top 50, and most of the guards in the top 50 I had a chance to play against. I mean, you had Hal Greer in Philly. You had Sam Jones in Boston. You had West. You had Oscar. I mean, I could just keep naming guys, but we had some great guards on that top 50 team.
So I think that was it for our viewer questions. Got one last question we'd like to ask all our legends before we let you go. We're getting together season 2 of our music playlist. So what's something, it could be something old, something new. What's something that you listen to either around the house, in the car, whenever you're just going about your day?
Well, I listen to jazz more than anything today.
Okay.
You know, I'm not a rap guy.
Okay.
So, you know, I listen to the old blues. I listen to the jazz stations here in the city of Detroit, and that's what I enjoy mostly right now.
Okay. Throw a little jazz on there for you. And again, what was the name of your mentoring program? Throw that out there.
Yeah, the mentoring is Being Youth Institute. Being Youth Institute. And so we've had, like I said, we've got 88 boys in our program. And every boy that's become a senior in our program, we're 100% graduation rate, which is unheard of.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah, but I want to give a shout out to the mentors, because I've got 88 Black men, families trying to raise their families, trying to have their own careers, but they give up their time to give to these boys. And without them, these boys would not be successful. And I just want to give them a shout out, because they deserve all my love. Without them, there would be no program.
Definitely. A big shout out to them. A big shout out to you for the work that you did with the retired players and your mentoring. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. My pleasure meeting you.
Of course. Likewise. We'll talk to you soon.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That'll do it for this week's Legends Live. As you know, we've got new episodes live every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central on the NBA Alumni's Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch page. I'd like to remind everyone you can watch replays of any episode at legendsofbasketball.com/legendslive. You can catch the audio replay to our conversations by searching for Legends Live wherever you get your podcasts. I'd like to give a thank you to Dave Bing for joining us. Thank you to Bridget and Julio behind the scenes, and we'll see you next Thursday.